The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Lord, to you, Lord.
James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." He replied, "What do you wish me to do for you?" They answered him, "Grant that in your glory we may sit one at your right and the other at your left." Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" They said to him, "We can." Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right or at my left is not mine to give, but is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they became indignant at James and John. Jesus summoned them and said to them, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers over the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones make their authority over them felt. But it shall not be so among you. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be the slave of all. For the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Just as a child physically grows into adulthood through various life stages, there are similar stages of growth in the spiritual life when we transition from many self-centered priorities to embrace God's plan for our lives. This process is defined by the Greek word METANOIA, or conversion. One well-known example is found in the book of Acts. Saul of Tarsus was a scholar of Mosaic law, yet he condoned the murder of Stephen, as Saul made it his personal mission to destroy the early church. In modern terms, we might think of Saul as public enemy number 1. Then one day, Saul experienced a conversion on his way to Damascus. Saul encountered the risen Christ, and it changed his life to become the apostle St. Paul, who spent the rest of his life proclaiming the gospel even unto martyrdom. Even today, the church celebrates the feast of St. Paul's conversion each year on the 25th of January. Personal conversion stories continue to occur even today in every walk of life. They are signposts to encourage the church to never lose hope, to never give up on anyone. Here is just one example. Back in the late 1920s, Al Capone virtually owned Chicago. Also known as Scarface, Capone's criminal empire generated over $100 million each year through illegal operations as he controlled the majority of Chicago's vice industry. Capone's empire included bootlegging liquor, gambling establishments, even controlling the red light district. By 1930, Capone was considered public enemy number 1. Capone's ability to avoid prison was due in no small part to a crooked lawyer who had the nickname Easy Eddie. He was a ruthless mastermind in tax evasion and maneuvering around criminal charges against Capone. In exchange, Easy Eddie received a huge salary along with a plush lifestyle in a Chicago mansion that spanned an entire city block. In spite of his criminal enterprise, Easy Eddie found himself in a spiritual battle, realizing that his life violated about every single one of God's commandments. Then Eddie had a conversion, a moment when he decided to make all things right. In his desire to change, Eddie wanted to give his son, Butch, a better life, along with a legacy of dignity and respect. To accomplish this, Eddie went to the authorities and exposed everything he knew about Capone's illegal operations. Eddie also knew that his testimony would make him a marked man. That premonition became a reality a short time later when Eddie's life was snuffed out in a blaze of gunfire on a lonely Chicago street. The Chicago newspapers would report that Easy Eddie's testimony was the key that destroyed Capone's empire. But just as important, the evidence of Eddie's conversion became clear when the police discovered a rosary, a crucifix, and a religious medallion in Eddie's pocket. A short time later, Eddie's son Butch joined the Air Force and became a lieutenant commander during World War II. One day, Butch's squadron was sent on a mission. And no sooner were they in the air when Butch noticed that someone had forgotten to top off his fuel tank. So the flight commander demanded that Butch return to the carrier. The moment Butch headed back towards the fleet, he saw a squadron of enemy aircraft fast approaching in attack formation. Without concern for his own safety, Butch fired at 5 enemy aircraft until all his ammunition was spent. He continued to chase the enemy aircraft until they left in retreat, allowing Butch to safely land his tattered plane on that aircraft carrier. In 1942, Butch received the Medal of Honor as the Navy's first World War II flying ace. So we might wonder, was Easy Eddie successful to leave his son a legacy of respect? History would say yes, as Chicago named its largest airport, Chicago O'Hare, after the heroism of Easy Eddie's son, Butch O'Hare. Today's gospel presents us with another conversion story. Some might call it a work in progress. 2 disciples, James and John, who had the street name the Sons of Thunder, boldly asked Jesus to assign them top positions of power. Upon hearing this, the other 10 disciples became indignant because they too wanted that same position of power, to be at the top of the organization, so to speak. Jesus, fully aware that all 12 disciples were thinking in self-centered human terms, explained that conversion of the mind and heart is required to achieve greatness in the kingdom of God. Jesus reminds them that the human quest for ego, power, position, and authority are not the goal of those who enter the kingdom of God. Rather, whoever wishes to be great in the kingdom must be a servant. Whoever wants to be first must be a slave to all. My brothers and sisters, in our modern culture, this is a hard teaching for many people to accept. Yet conversion, metanoia, is a necessary step to enter the kingdom of heaven. Jesus reminds us, unless you become like a child, you will not enter the kingdom of God. Let us also remember that conversion is always possible. Some of us may have the faith of St. Paul, while others might recognize within themselves the lifestyle of Easy Eddie, as they have spent a lifetime building their empire. The key point is this: don't give up and don't count anyone out. Jesus didn't give up on his disciples. He knew that in God's time, they too would be converted and be willing to give their very lives for the sake of the gospel. And so today, I would like to close with a quote from St. Francis de Sales, who wrote, "Always be impartial and just in your deeds. Put yourself into your neighbor's place and him into yours, and then you will judge fairly. Frequently examine your own heart, whether it is so disposed toward your neighbor as you would have his disposed toward you if you and he were to exchange places. For this is the true test of what it means to be a disciple of Christ and to do the will of God."